If you haven't heard about Anchor by Spotify, it's the easiest way to make a podcast with everything that you need all in one place. Let me explain. Anchor has tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. When hosting on Anchor, you can distribute your podcast on any listening platform like Spotify, Apple Podcast, and many, many more. It's everything that you need to make a podcast all in one place. And best of all, Anchor is totally free. Download the Anchor app today or go to anchor.fm to get started. From Battlefield Studio Alpha, welcome to the Wartime Leadership Podcast, where we explore what spiritual resiliency looks like from different perspectives. We often focus on the physical, emotional, and social areas of resiliency, but too often we neglect the spiritual pillar. Now, this looks different for everyone. We will be exploring what spiritual resilience looks like in the lives of our guests, who are people from all different walks of life. I'm your host, Nathan Coy, and today's episode is sponsored by Success Draft, where we help you transform your dreams into drafted plans. Head over to successdraft.com to get started on your future today. Today's guest is an interesting one that I was connected with via LinkedIn through a couple of different buddies of mine. Everyone kind of pointed fingers over in this direction, and then our good friend Trip Bodenheimer with the Shadows podcast had him on, and boom, the connection was made even more solidified. Today, Matthew Brackett, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing very well, Nathan. Thank you very much for the introduction. Very well up here in Massachusetts right now, where it's snowing, but we're doing very well and very happy and privileged to be here with you on this podcast.
Absolutely, and we are honored to have you. We were actually talking right beforehand, and I was like, Matt, I am here, and I thought that you were still down in Mexico when we were talking, and I was like, man, it just got cold here in South Carolina all of a sudden. He said, yeah, it's snowing here, and I was like, wait a second, where are you at? So really, really neat to, and I know me, I'm sitting here just in a hoodie, kind of snuggled up inside myself because it is a rather cool day. Matt, how are you doing? How's life treating you?
Life is full of challenges right now, but with a lot of hope and vision. So I don't know if you want to expound on that. Challenges because of big transitions that I've gone through in life, and I'm establishing myself professionally in a new way, in a new role, new identity, if you want to use that word, a new way of serving people.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's, yes, full of challenges and uncertainties, but also there's a lot of hope and confidence. And I'm surrounded by so many good people like your good self. So many good people that see the vision, that support me, that see the talent and skills that I can bring to others.
Yeah, it's always nice to open up LinkedIn and see a message from you or Robert or Trip and just really feel lifted up, because you have a very good natural ability to be able to do that to people just by your presence and your voice. But hey, before we get into all of the transitional stuff and what's been going on in life, I have 5 easy questions. Well, I think they're easy at least, but they are completely random, picked by our random question generator. Who inspires you?
Yes, thank you, Nathan. I was hoping when I started talking about transition that we would avoid the 5 questions, but we didn't get by.
Nice try.
So who inspires me? First and foremost, I am inspired by people that I find on the street. Their ability to sit there, their ability to ask for help, their ability in so many ways to accept whatever they're going through, whatever brought them to the street. They inspire me, and I always try to honor them.
Yeah, it's always interesting walking around downtown with our son and knowing my son's past and how he interacts with individuals that are on the street is really, really powerful and says a lot about the nature of a child. So I gravitate towards answers like that, and I appreciate it. Do you have any nicknames?
I grew up, they called me Matt Fat Stinking Brat.
Matt Fat Stinking Brat.
Matt Fat Stinking Brat, or is it Fat Matt Stinking Brat? One of those. Yes, so I have 10th of 13 children, and I think it's common in our family that we like rhymes, and we like little nicknames here and there. So yes, that was mine. And so that's shortened now for Fat Matt is usually what I'm called. And recently people have called me, this is funny, this isn't a nickname, but people have called me Marlon Brandon.
I can see it. I can actually see it. Like a young Martin Brandon. Maybe I'll just start referring to you as Martin.
So funny. I was in an AT&T shop yesterday, and the guy was selling me a phone, and he's like, "Wait, I hope you're not offended by this, but there's so many things about you that remind me of Marlon Brandon." I got a kick out of it. I said, "No, I've heard this before. But
maybe it's the jawline. Yes. Could be the jawline.
It could be, and then sometimes the way I speak. Sometimes I'm not sure. As long as they just don't compare me to the grandfather or the Godfather. Sorry.
I was going to make the reference. In fact, I'm kind of doing the chin thing right now, but we'll leave it alone. What is the worst or the most important life lesson that you have learned by someone? What is the most important life lesson that you have learned?
From someone?
Yes.
Or just in life? You'll have to edit the silence.
No, the silence is golden. Makes people know that you're really contemplating it.
What was the question again?
What is the most important life lesson that you have learned from someone? Or the biggest life lesson? You tell us.
The biggest life lesson, there's just so many, but my attention goes to this one, which is the ability to embrace our challenges, to embrace our pain, but it goes very much with the topic of your podcast about resilience. The ability to sit in pain and learn lessons from it. And I've seen that, and again, maybe that's a conversation for another day, but we've all seen that in so many people.
Yeah.
And I've become, I like to talk about befriending pain because it has a lot to do with my story. It's so hard for us as human beings. It's not agreeable, but the results and the fruit that can come from that can be so abundant.
There is so much truth in that, especially when you think about famous individuals that have committed suicide, or people that you would not have imagined even being on that side of thought doing that. And those individuals, everyday people who fight through their challenges and overcome them. That's a lot of truth in that. And that one went in a different direction, and I'm glad that it did, because it's setting up everyone for what this interview is going to truly be like. All right, here's another fun one, at least. Okay, a friend pulls you up on stage for karaoke. What song are you doing?
I would pick a song from Michael Bublé.
Oh, yes. See, there was so much in common between us, I swear. Old sound, but still with that new. Oh, yeah. Good choice. Has a celebrity death ever caused you to cry?
The death, we'd have to define what a celebrity is, but as no.
Okay. Why is that? Is it because you look at death differently?
Why, for me to cry at someone's death, there has to be an emotional bond. I suppose maybe I don't have emotional bonds with celebrities.
Okay. That's fair.
Right?
That's a fair.
I mean, it's always, so many deaths. All death is a loss, right? And when I think of celebrities, and there's one death that I was very close to, a very famous person. It was John Paul II. But I wasn't, Pope John Paul II. But again, it was, his death was the result of years of sickness and illness. So again, I think age sometimes where people expect it. No, I do have to say when we start talking about my own life is, and I don't mean to jump the gun, but even in ministry and in chaplaincy and being so closely linked to death and to the accompanying people, because this sort of contradicts what I just said, but accompanying people who are dying or their loved ones as they accompany someone who's dying, I get very emotional in those moments, even if I never knew the person. Mm-hmm. I suppose surrounding emotion does definitely affect me.
That I can see 100%. And I think that it's more what they have done with their life and the celebration side of that. There's actually a really famous quote by Dr. Seuss that says, "Don't cry because it's over, but smile because it happened." And I use that a lot when I'm talking to people. I use that quote to define what it looks like for death to me personally. So,
right.
Well, hey, Matthew, now that we've kind of done this warm up and got the juices flowing, and you're already ready to go. You were raring to go already, so I'm glad about that. Why don't we go into your background? Kind of just tell the listeners where you've been, what you've gone through. Kind of bring us up to the current, what you're currently doing in life.
Definitely. So Nathan, I'm the 10th of 13 children, and as I mentioned, I grew up in Massachusetts. And from my faith background is Catholic, and so I grew up around that. Went to a Catholic school. An older brother joined seminary, became a priest. He joined the seminary when I was very young. I had another brother who joined a monastery as a monk. So I was, and I had an aunt who was a nun. So I was just very exposed to that type of lifestyle. And so at the age of 18, I went off to volunteer time with a Catholic charity. And during that time of volunteering, I made the decision to join the seminary to begin my own adventure. And that's what I did. So I joined what they would call a religious order in the Catholic Church. And so, think of the Jesuits, Dominicans, Franciscans. So I joined a religious order that has an international presence. And that brought me really on an adventure. I was with them for 30 years. And I'll lay that out really quickly for you. There's 10 or 11 years of education and training that I did in Connecticut and in Italy, in Rome, and philosophy, theology, classical humanities. And then there's two very intensive years, kind of like 2 years of boot camp, which is very intense spiritual training. Really, it's sort of detachment from the world, from other things, and sort of like, as they do in boot camp, it's sort of letting go of the old and putting on the new. But as some boot camps and trainings are 8, 12 weeks, this is 2 years.
Wow.
And it's intense on all levels. We had a lot of silence, a lot of prayer, meditation, dipping into the spiritual life, connection with the divine, a lot of also just fraternity and growing together, teamwork, learning so many skills on so many different levels. A lot of also, it was physically very demanding, mentally, emotionally. So it just touches so many aspects of the human person. So that's how it began. That was called novitiate. So 2 years of training and education, and then. And that brought me then to, as I said, to Rome. And I received ordination as a Catholic priest in December of 2002. I continued. At that point, I was working in Rome. I worked in the area of training and education of people for ministry. So I continued that work in Rome, and then I was assigned to run a seminary, to be the director of a seminary in Colombia, South America. And then I was sent to Ireland to be also director of our seminary in really the national director of our organizations and operations in Ireland and England. And then to Chile, South America again, where I worked with a lot of couples and just individuals in their personal, spiritual, and human journey of growth, of development. And then in the midst of all that, obviously, you're doing a lot of what the Catholics call sacraments and ministry and retreats and talks and celebrating religious services, visiting people in the hospital, all those different things. Then I was sent back to Rome as a director of an international residence there for priests that would be sent to Rome to study, for postgraduate and doctoral work. And the idea was that they would live in community and to cultivate, because it's very hard. You go to a foreign city, and if you're on your own, it's a hard thing to do, right? Culturally and for so many reasons. So their directors, superiors in their own countries, they were from about 20 different countries. They wanted to send them to a residence where they knew that they could live with other priests, where they could foster fraternity and prayer life and all those good things and be well taken care of. So I ran a house like that for 3 years. During that time, I also finished a lot of postgraduate work in spiritual theology and in human development, for mission, for vocation. And then I raised the white flag. I had been carrying for a good number of years a lot of this internal confusion, crisis, which manifested itself in many ways. And it really, I didn't know what depression was back then, but there was a lot of anxiety and depression, confusion. So I finished all that stuff in Rome, and I signed up for inpatient care in a clinic to really look at myself, to look at my life, to look at where I'd been and where I wanted to go, what was working, and all really to look at all the things that weren't working, and really work a lot on myself. So as life does, right? And I talked about pain before. Pain leads us to have to make decisions. It brings a lot of things to the surface, or it leads us to unhealthy, what we could call unhealthy behaviors, which I also experienced, right? in that. But you also find in unhealthy behaviors, you don't find the answer, right? It becomes a vicious circle, right? And including in unhealthy behaviors, I would also include suicide. While suicide is generally, it's understood in its context, but it's generally caused by pain. There's pain that leads someone that I can't deal with this anymore.
Yeah.
Right. So I checked into inpatient care for 4 months, and fascinating and such a growth experience, but so difficult because I was pushed, I was challenged in so many ways. I had resisted, I suppose, looking at myself for a long time. And then during that, I took a sabbatical year. I call that year a journey of coming home to myself. And my general sense was that I had lost myself on the way. While I had so many amazing experiences, and I think I did a lot of good, and the good Lord did a lot through me. But I also lost myself in other ways. And so I saw that as my journey coming home. I'd been away from home for so long. It was great to be able to live with my dad. My mother has since passed away. So to live with my dad during that time and really just grow back into who's the Matt Fat Stinking Brat, right? Who's that Matthew that I was so long ago, and how can we not only not go back to that, but who am I? Who am I beyond the cloth and the collar, and beyond what people expect of a priest? And it was very enriching, but challenging on so many levels. Right? And then during that year was when I sort of considered, is priestly ministry for me? I had resisted putting that option on the table for a long time.
That's a really difficult
because putting that option
to ask yourself. I mean, just, who am I beyond this? Because I think a lot of military members ask the same thing about the uniform when it's time to take off our uniform in the same way, or
It's a big
police,
deal.
or
Yes.
anyone that has that uniform.
Yes. It's a big deal. I would even say in corporate as well. But yes, when we're linked to such a strong identity as in the military or other service-oriented groups or in ministry, it's so because it touches on so many aspects of your human person, right? And for me, so in this journey, there's a psychological side, there's a mental, there's an emotional side, there's a theological, spiritual side to my discernment and to my reframing of things. There's a social side. Right? It has a lot of consequences on relationships. So I was sort of grappling and just trying to integrate and reconcile a lot of things. And during that year, then I decided, no, I wanted to go back to ministry. I want to put it on again and see how it fits. And that's when I went into the Navy as a Navy chaplain. That had been in my mind for a long time. This is something that I want to do. I want to serve as a Catholic priest. Oftentimes, you again, it's such a beautiful ministry, but you serve generally Catholics, and I was like, I want to go beyond that. I want to serve a much broader population of people. And the military just struck me as what an amazing opportunity to serve people in uniform, serve people that serve in such a unique environment where there's specific stressors and expectations and identities. And there's so much diversity, so many types of people, and to be able to be there for them. So that was on my mind. That had been in my mind probably for 5 or 6 years. And so I said, this is my opportunity to do it. And so that's what I did. So I became a staff officer in the Navy, a chaplain, and I went all through all the training, and I was assigned to work with Marines and sailors at Camp Johnson, North Carolina. And that's a whole nother, I said one of the best decisions I made was to be able to do that. And it was, again, when my decision then to leave ministry, it was a bigger decision. So it also meant that I would have to then leave active duty, which was difficult for me to do because I very much enjoyed and loved the ministry. Although it was very intense, and I'm older, right? I joined the military in my 40s. So
and you're sitting there looking at these younger kids and you're going,
oh. And it's an intense ministry. It's not for the faint of heart. It's go, 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 right? Anyone in the military is go, go, go. But and as a chaplain, it's go, go, go. It's very impactful. There's another word that I would use for it, but it's a very, very intense ministry. It's because you're dealing with big deals every day and all day, right? Big deal situations, and because you deal with a large mass of humanity, right? So that was, again, I don't mean to go down that rabbit hole, but such a great experience. And during that time, that it clarified for me that while I love to serve people, Catholic priesthood ministry is not the place for me. But it never became an easy decision, no matter how long I put it off.
Yeah.
It never became an easy, because it's something that I took very seriously, and I continue to take it very seriously.
You had a lot invested in that portion of your life to just kind of pick up and try to walk away and into something that's unknown. That's
yes, and there's that as well. It's scary because you step into insecurity. And I remember the day that I received my I finished active duty. I finished my time in prison. You get a dispensation, as they call it, and I was like, "Oh my, what have I done to myself?" It was like 2 days of, oh boy, where all my securities and safety nets, they were gone, right? And so that sort of hit home in that moment. But yes, and I wanted a parenthesis on with this, or just a side point, is so many people stay in very uncomfortable and difficult situations, whether it be in relationships, or whether it be in workplaces or positions. They do it because it's what's known. It's even if it's not comfortable, it's what's known. It's what feels safer than the unknown. And so, and like I sat in that for 10 years. And I don't regret having sat in it for 10 years, because I learned so much along the way. But it's a common human experience. hopefully that sitting and things like that will help people make the best decisions possible. I'm not a huge fan of, just knee-jerk decisions either, because oftentimes those can be misplaced or really miss the mark. So, but I'm not a big fan of having to sit for too long when it's really just fear that keeps people in the same place. Fear of many different types. So I've started a practice. I'm finishing a master's degree in the psychology of leadership, and I'm started a practice that really has two types of services: individual coaching, geared towards people in high level leadership roles, to really help them at the intersection of life and leadership and the personal and professional. So it's a very personal element to, but how do we integrate all of these aspects into a healthier human being so that we can lead ourselves better and lead others better? Because if there's showing the way we show up for ourselves, it directly affects the way we're going to show up for others, whether we realize it or not. So I see that as very important. And then there's an educational side to the services I offer, whether it be conferences, workshops, again, around personal development, around leadership skills and abilities, developing those. And with that is also the diversity, equity, and inclusion training and education, because it has to do with the human element. And I'm very passionate about the human person, the complex beauties of the human person. So those are the services that I'm offering, and I look to work bilingually south of the border in Latin America and also here in the States. And I'm looking for opportunities as I begin to grow the business.
It really sounds like you have used all of your past experience. I mean, because you're very diverse in what you did there, but especially in that educational piece, being able to take that educational piece that you used to do within Rome and to bring it into this world. That's a good, solid transition over. Definitely not an easy decision at all to make.
All right, and it's difficult to translate. A lot of people, the civilian sector has a hard time understanding my past.
Yeah.
Really they say, "Well, that's amazing," but it doesn't really translate. So we don't need you. That's sort of what I've come up against. But I know I have a lot to offer, so I continue to walk forward.
Oh, I think it's amazing. There is a lot that we could unpack there. A lot of real. I mean, you were dropping nuggets left and right of that transition and those transition marks that you made during your time in the Navy as a chaplain. You said that you wanted to not only serve Catholics, but you wanted to serve a diverse field. What did that look like for you? Because I mean, you were serving alongside Marines, Navy members. What did it look like to you to be able to talk to somebody of an opposite faith or of opposing views to your own and still walk them down a spiritual journey?
Yes, I would say that really a lot of people come to the chaplain unless you're stationed in a church, right, in a base chapel, for example. Right? But a lot of people come to the chaplain because you're the chaplain. You're a safe, sacred space where they can talk generally about their humanity. Now that does include spirituality, of course, but that wasn't necessarily the topic of so many conversations. Right? It's how do I deal with my humanity in this reality, in this context, or with things that I went through even before I joined the military, but they're catching up to me. And a lot of other aspects. So I think being a chaplain in uniform does so much because people feel that this chaplain I can relate because we're wearing the uniform. He understands culture, the context, and so many other stuff. So, and it's a safe place. As you know, in the military, the chaplaincy is a very sacred and legally protected space where you can talk about anything. Because in the professional setting, people are always worried about how is this going to affect my career in so many professional settings. And when you talk to a chaplain, when it's a good chaplain, it will never affect your career.
Yeah, that's a very valid point. A good chaplain.
All right. And so, now there's other things we could talk about, right? As regards culture, right? Now, does going to the chaplain look good? I have to be worried about that, right? Because it might be, or this misconstrued idea that I will be looked down upon, or this bullying that goes on when people talk to the chaplain. Goes, hey, what's wrong with you? You're weak, and all that other stuff. But we don't need to talk about that right now. So I think I was just dealing with the human person, as I said, the beauty of the human person, and that I really believe in, and meeting people where they're at, physically and spiritually, emotionally and mentally. And the beautiful thing about chaplains as well is I always said my boots are my office, is because I want to meet people where they're at, also physically, in the classroom, out in the field, wherever they are, to meet them. And that's where a lot of meaningful encounters happen, and not when you wait for them to come to your
I think
office.
when people see your willingness to get out of the comfortable of your office and move into the uncomfortable of theirs, people are more apt to open up to become, and that's that frontline worker mentality, the blue collar, if you would, mentality of, I need you to come to where I am. Meet me here.
Yes. Visibility, availability, approachability. Those are the things that I would often think about. And when they see you out and about, it makes you visible and approachable.
Yeah, the stigma that's associated with going to the chaplain is the same one attached to going to mental health. I am an advocate 100% of going to mental health, going to a chaplain, going to a place that is there designed to work with you.
Right.
Or for you.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So
but we know, but there's a lot we could talk about there. But yes, it is. But we also know that when, as they say, when the rubber hits the road or things get really bad, well, especially forward deployed, then the chaplain becomes a key element to
100%
to offer us strength, right, that we turn to in crisis. Crisis is everyone all of a sudden turns to the chaplain, right? And that's why, because of ministry experience throughout the years, you become very used to standing in crisis with other people in crisis situations.
I think you would probably want people to be more proactive in that in that realm than reactive, but you're there if there is the reactive side.
That's right. And to bring stability, hopefully. I think just all my previous experience, I felt that they helped me so much to be an effective chaplain with the Marines and sailors.
Yeah.
And I got the compliment that we can close this topic with this. The compliment that from many Marines would ask me, were you a former Marine? Or are you a former Marine? For me, that was a big deal because obviously Marines are very selective of who they... Right? And so I was like, no. But so that means I adapted well. So thank God for that. And I was able to serve them better because they definitely deserve that.
Well, that's interesting that they would ask you the question, because there was probably something about the way you approached or the way you came in that made them think, well, maybe he was, maybe he is one of us.
Right.
Hey, so what did your leadership philosophy look like, or your style of leadership look like, going from the Catholic Church as a priest moving into the Navy? What did you take over with you into the Navy that you've also brought out to corporate America?
I took it all. I don't think a lot of things changed. As situations change, there's a type of leadership that you would call, and again, they're all leadership theories and styles, right? That you call adaptive leadership, which I think because of my personality or whatever it is, I'm very good at adapting, right? And reading the situation and things like that. And then there's the servant leadership, which is commonly talked about, which is really just authority. I'm given authority and leadership to be able to serve the greater good, right? And that's the vision of servant leadership, and it's very much also the vision of what we'd call transformational leadership. Big word that's used now, and I don't think people always understand what what makes up transformational leadership. But without turning this into a class, but transformational leadership is just where you facilitate a process in your people of growth and of transformation, as the word says. And there's different elements that help that happen. So yes, that would be adaptive servant and transformational would be the ones that would come to mind.
Oh, I like it. Especially the adaptive, because I think each situation calls for a different way of approaching it, the empathy side of leadership.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's why in that field, the ability to connect to reality, that's why the ability to see. Oftentimes we're blinded by our own selves, right? Or we're deaf, right? It's the ability to really hear our people, hear situations, to hear the silence, and to see the invisible. It's so important to be able to adapt. And then the ability to be surrounded by people that advise you. But anyways,
definitely to be able to hear them, right? Because if
right.
if you've invited them in as a mentor, a leader, as somebody that you value the input coming from, you need to be able to hear them.
Yes.
So we've kind of danced around it a little bit, and I know that we've been in this realm in each of the different segments that we've done, but could you define for us spiritual resilience?
I will put it in very simple terms. Just resilience in general is the ability to bounce back and grow. Spiritual resilience would be the ability to bounce back and grow aligned with my higher power. Now, that's just sort of a made-up definition on the fly, but
well, good job.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it is though. I think that as we've done this journey and we've heard each person's different definition of what it looks like, it's played out a little bit differently in each person's life, and there's different elements to it. So how do you build up spiritual resiliency within yourself? What do you personally do to form that foundation?
There's a lot there, with my journey, with where I'm at now. For me, vision, the bigger picture is always important. Yes, the bigger picture is always important. And so when I think back to a lot of the trials and difficulties in my life, and maybe just the challenge I'm going through now, right, in a different way, but to see the bigger picture, and that has very much to do with resilience. Because the resilient people, and there's three things that make people resilient, and then I'll continue answering your question. And there's a lot of things that can make, but there's three little nuggets that might be helpful. That resilient people know and sort of have a conviction that suffering or difficulty or challenges are going to come my way. Secondly, resilient people select where to focus their attention. And resilient people ask if this is helping me or harming me. If what I'm doing now to deal with, normally resilience happens through pain, through tragedy, trauma, tribulation, right? And so how we respond to that. And I like to use exercise is a big thing, so let's use muscles. Muscles, in order to grow, and let's not even just talk about grow, in order to be better, to be fit, to be resilient, they need to be exercised. Right? And muscles, in order to grow, right, through weightlifting and weight training, they need to be slightly traumatized or torn in a certain way. And that's how they grow.
Yeah. And
so it's in that, then going back to what I said, to know that when you walk into the gym, you know that pain is going to come your way, right? If you want to grow. So pain is going to come my way at some point. Resilient people then select where to focus their attention when that pain is there, right? And that's why they talk a lot about gratitude. They talk a lot about mindfulness, the importance of meditation, and all those, and the importance of the positive. I'm not a fan, I'm going to, big parentheses here, I'm not a fan of let's just focus on the positive and pretend the negative doesn't exist. So that does not serve us well either. We have to name the trauma, name the tragedy, name the tribulation, name the difficulty, name the challenge, give it a name and claim it. But also understand when I focus on it, is it helping me or is it harming me? How much of this focus helps me, serves me well, and how much gets in the way? So I went down a tangent there, but I think it helps our conversation.
Oh no, it's absolutely amazing. I love this. Is it helping or hurting me? Select where to focus the attention. No difficult situations are coming. Absolutely, 100%. That is the definitive resilient individual is going to ask themselves these questions or prepare themselves in this way. So now, how do you, obviously, when we hit a situation, we are reliant on resilience in order to get through that situation. What can we do beforehand to spiritually prepare ourselves for those types of situations?
Yes, and this I'll continue answering that because it's very linked to the prior question. Is in my own life, I think my relationship with God, with the transcendent, with my higher power, was always very strong. And I believe that helped me during my many years of in many ways feeling hopeless or helpless and being confused, going through a lot of darkness, if you want to use that term, or if you want to use the biblical term of the desert or the winter, as we're in here up here, right? Going through a period, it was my I suppose my habits, my good habits, in the spiritual and many other aspects of my life, helped me to continue moving forward. Even though I felt like I was walking through quicksand many days of those years, right? But the good habits kept me rooted in what was really important. And that's why I go back to the big picture. Another thing that helped me in going through all of this was, where do I want to be? Who do I want to be? What's really important here? Right. So it's sort of keeping my eye on the big picture and this. I'm headed. That's where I'm headed. Or for some years, I don't know where this is going to bring me, but it's going to bring me somewhere good. And it's important for me to keep walking and to keep listening.
So for you, what was that moment? What was that moment that you had to utilize spiritual resiliency in order to make it through that situation?
I don't think there was one moment. It was for me, it was a continuum, because it wasn't like one tragic thing that happened to me. It was sort of a series of things over a number of years. And I'm not saying I was good at it. I think it was the tribulation, the trauma, the crisis, the things that pushed me there, that forced me to dig a lot deeper. That first thing I said about have the conviction that challenges will come my way. Because we as Christians, we talk a lot about the cross. And so theoretically we know that it's there, and but oftentimes, and this is, you can quote me on this one, purification, or for people that wouldn't understand that word, is trial, tribulation, challenges, adversity, comes through the door that's less expected, the least expected door. And that's what I probably wasn't ready for. Because it hits and hurts you a lot deeper. But there was really, it wasn't one moment, but I think it was knowing that I suppose something like a conviction that kept me going is that I have a mission. God put me here to do a lot of good, and I want to continue to do that. And I'm not going to let this beat me. So that's sort of an ego and pride element in it, but I would consider it a healthy element, that I'm not going to let this beat me.
Yeah, nobody wants to seek out the Job moment, but everybody wants to know that they can make it through.
Right. Yes.
Well, I really have enjoyed this conversation, especially just to kind of pick your brain just a little bit to narrow down some of these things, because I think that everyone tries to come at resiliency, especially the physical, social, and mental side, mental side by thinking of them as individual elements instead of seeing them as this bigger picture of overall resilience. And when it comes to the military side, we really look at spiritual resiliency and go, you need to be spiritually resilient. And that's it. Like physical, it's easy. You say, hey, you need to go for a run. Mental, okay, you need to download what you're currently going through. Social, go hang out with people. It'll be fine. Go hang out with them. When it comes to spiritual side, we're very often like, okay, that's a touchy subject that brings up a lot of emotions. So we're just not even going to go there.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Emotions some people can interpret it as sort of the weaker side of the human being. We don't need that. That's not what we're here for. But again, when we talk about spiritual, I include mental and emotional in there because in human beings as spiritual beings, in my view, the mental and emotional are part of the faculties of the spirit. Right. So I'm not a big fan of dissecting the human experience, right? But integrating it. But you're right. Right. And then the social side is, I think that's a lot more complex than people think, is really how to have good relationships, how to be resilient in that and have difficult conversations and forgive and all these other things. That is really just the social and human element.
Yeah, as an extrovert, yes, I don't understand how my wife, who's an introvert, just needs to be alone. For me, being alone doesn't do the same thing. But to understand that all four of those pillars work together in order to help us get through stuff. Like, I'll give you a personal experience. I had running taken away from me for a couple of months because of surgery. Well, that's how I always expunged physically that stress I was going through. Well, now that's taken away from me. What do I do to fix that or to replace that? And I didn't have a good way of fixing it. So I had to lean heavily on my mental side to be able to counteract that. And so being at your position, this is the thing that I think is difficult for whether you're a pastor, an imam, a priest, a chaplain. You typically only see people at their worst when they come to you for that help. And
right.
How did that weigh on you, having to deal with everyone bringing you the bad?
Right. Yeah. Or the stressful, or the intense. Right. I would say that there's also, as a priest, you participate also in some of the highlight, with a marriage, baptism, or you celebrate a lot with a lot of people. But yes, you're definitely there for the highs and also for the lowest lows, right? Whether that be in the confessional or just the tragic moments of what people bring to you, right? And accompanying people on their deathbeds and so many other tragic and traumatic moments. I think it's also, I see that as an exercise. I mean, since I did it so much, I would never say that I got used to it, and that is a real danger for people in ministry, and something that I'm going to quick shout out to people in ministry, where we have to be so careful with getting used to, because the human being gets used to anything, and when we're walking sacred ground, it's so important to keep ourselves in check, to never get used, whether it be doing religious services or whether it be walking on the sacred ground of people's lives. Because this is a unique moment of someone's life, and we can't treat it like, well, I've done this before. This is the same thing, right? And I would say the same thing as the doctors doing surgeries. They've done the same thing, so many times, but each one is such a unique, incredible, but sacred moment, right? That you have to treat it as such. So you get very used to listening to all these things, and I suppose you just develop a mechanism to not own it, right? It's a gift that someone gives me, and I place it to the side, and I don't get emotionally involved. I get emotionally involved, and I would call it, I forget there was a word I used, but this sort of, anyway, there was this where you're emotionally involved in the moment, but then there's this detachment. And so I think it's an ability that you can develop, right, through the exercise by doing it often. and where you just forget things, and you deal with it, you're fully present, but then you just let go. And the downside is that, as I just said, that you get used, and so you don't treat things with the delicacy or the importance that they have in the moment, right? And you can brush things off that for an individual is not brush worthy. It's nothing to brush off. It's what they're going through in that moment, what they're experiencing. So that's what I could say to that. And I think it's just something that I developed by doing it. But there's something else that you said in your question is seeing people at their worst. And I wouldn't say to see people at their worst. I would say to see people in their truth, because we all walk with facades, right? And when you hear confessions, or when people come talk to you in their whatever they're going through, you're seeing I'm seeing this person in their more totality for who they are, and it's beautiful. I would admire, respect, and love a person so much more after a conversation like that, and admire them.
I really, man, you're dropping so many things in there that are so good. I wouldn't call it seeing people at their worst. It's seeing people in their truth. That is so profound. Because that truth doesn't have to always remain. It doesn't have to be there constantly. But it's that position of helping people move through it, get through it, and then step off and watch them go.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. So now, how have you taken this? And this is going to be the final question I have for you. How have you taken all of that knowledge and thought and moved it into helping executives and people working in the corporate world?
That's still to be seen, because my business still has to grow a lot. But what I'm in the little experience that I have now in this new role is I still bring the talents and the skills that I bring is that people are very comfortable talking to me. I inspire confidence, trust, and I think my background helps them see that I can trust this person, or I can confide in them, because this person knows how to be confidential, and this person he's heard everything, right? And so this is someone that I want to talk to. So that's one way, and then and that would be the simple answer. I think that's one of the things that I bring to that, and I think this is my global experience and my knowledge of the human person, because that's really what I bring to my services. Is not don't ask me to talk about business or finances or right, but I can definitely talk about the human. And I don't mean this in an arrogant way, but I can talk about the human person and how we lead ourselves and how we lead others through my personal experience, but also through working, just looking through the window into so many lives and learning so much in the process, and then just through education as well.
I think you have shown
I think
that you can listen to people and be able to break down, deduce what people are going through, and maybe those things that they don't see themselves, the 360 view that leaders always talk about wanting to have, but aren't always the best at executing that.
Yes, and help. I think I have an ability to focus really on the essentials. So when you come to me with all these things, all right, to diagnose rather quickly what some of the pillars of what you're talking about are, and how can we address
them. Hey, Matt, how can people get in contact with you?
To contact me, LinkedIn, Matthew Brackett, on my website, BrackettAlliance.com, and Instagram, Matthew Brackett Alliance. But that's probably the easiest way.
We'll make sure to have links to each and every single one of those in the description. Any final words for our listeners?
Final words. I thank you, and thank you for sitting through this longer version of this podcast. Thank you. And I would the last thing I want to say is, when we're going through difficulties or moments that require resilience, Do the exercise, put yourself 3, 5, 10 years down the road, or on your deathbed, look at the event, what you're going through. How would I like to see myself rise from this, face this, and come out the other side? How would I like to see myself come out better and stronger? And then to decide accordingly.
Absolutely amazing. Thank you, sir, for investing into us today. This has been an absolutely normal length podcast, so that's perfectly fine. Filled with lots of information. We didn't even get to all the questions, and I like that because the way that you have broken down and deduced spiritual resiliency, not just from the spiritual sense, but from the human experience sense, was absolutely breathtaking. So today's episode is only possible thanks to my friend and producer, G. Frazier with 369sounddesign.com. You have the hardest job. You've had it the hardest job for 49 episodes now, and I appreciate every single thing that you do for us. We are blessed here by the entire team of the Wartime Leadership Podcast. See you next time. Be blessed.